Hey guys, so today this video is just on the ETF XLF, and the financial sector. So the question is, how far will financials run? How far will the bull run go? So since the pandemic started, there was a huge sell-off, and then it's just been running for a long time, for about a year now, and the financial sector is at all-time highs right now. So all banks, everything like that, they're all at all-time highs for the most part. For the Canadian banks, it's the same idea. We'll have a look at this in a sec, but pretty much like for the monthly volatility, it's never been extremely high. Like it doesn't really get super volatile on the month. Like it's not like Bitcoin where it's just super volatile and it's ready to come down. It's kind of like consistent. So it's consistent and it eventually always has a bearish phase. So previously there was resistance at like that area, and we've broken out of that area in 2007. Actually, that was the all-time high, and we've broken out of that area. So now we're reaching new all-time highs. So how far can this go? Well, from a monthly perspective, there's a little bit more room to go till we start getting overbought on the monthly frame. So this could definitely, come up into the 70-80 region. Would it come that far? Who knows? But once we get up here, eventually, it's been pretty consistent that we will have a sell-off phase. So I'm thinking probably here is like the highest that we probably could go, because just from previous data, that's like where as high as we went. Even that's pushing it, so maybe just like, yeah, that might be pushing it. Let's just remove that, and we'll say that because here it's coming up onto that third band. That's where it usually peaks out. So just above, it looks like. So it's consistently been bearish there at other cycles. So we definitely could see this probably come up here. So another bit more, or we could see it come up here if we're really volatile. Would we come up here? Probably not. Not to 50, I don't think. Could we come up to 40, 41? Maybe. We maybe could. With this bull run and all the stimulus, we might be able to. But I think once we get up here already, would I be buying a position right now? I'd have to think about it. Would I just hold previous positions? I would. But I think we eventually will see a little bit of a correction before we take it back higher. Because this has always been like a stock that, like an ETF, that always eventually it gains, right? Eventually you make money as long as you hold it. But that can take a long time. Sometimes it can take several years, right? Because if, for example, you're holding in like 2018, you would have had to hold for a year before you made money there, right? 2 years even. So if you're buying at all-time highs, probably not a good idea. Like the crash of 2007 was pretty big. But eventually it did come back up, right? So could you get stuck in for a few years? Probably not with current conditions, but definitely we could see this come up and maybe take a retracement back down here and continue up. But that center line, we are starting to drift a little bit far from that center line. So there could be maybe possibly a bearish phase in the next year or two. We could definitely see this come back before it continues up. So let's just have a look at the XFN for the Canadian sector. So it's pretty similar, except it's a little bit more uprising compared to the American economy. It's more consistent. So there's been always a constant bullish run, then a little bit of a correction at in recession times, but then it just continues up, right? So eventually, holding bank stocks, you will make money if you're holding them for at least 5 or 10 years. Could we see a little bit of correction? We could. We could see XFN maybe come back to a median range of 36 if it wants to continue up. Could it come down a little bit? It could. But eventually, would we see it come up? We would. That's just as far as that's just how consistent bank stocks are. Like, that's like RBC and stuff like that. They're really consistent. So from a weekly perspective, the last few weeks have been really bull. Can we continue from here? Same thing. We definitely could. We could maybe see this come up maybe another 5 or 10%, or even higher if this is really going, because this was a really deep correction, right? It really sold off from the pandemic, and sell-offs like that have never happened before. Maybe in 2015 there was a little bit something, but those are so strong, right? Where they get bought up and they just continue because the volatility of the drop is so much. So you can see how volatile that was in other times. So we got a moment here in 2009 where it was really sold off for a few months, and that got bought up, and then we had another one in 2015, some kind of crash. Those are so volatile that when you buy those, the market just continues up, right? So think about that. We're buying here after such a deep sell-off. Could this continue up? Yeah, definitely could. Definitely could, because especially with having such deep sell-offs, the most deep sell-offs we've ever had in history. Eventually, would this keep coming up? It could. But would we see this take a little bit of profit and have a healthy correction? Eventually, we will. But do I think our bank stocks a good stock to hold? Definitely. For the dividend, they are. Eventually, you will make money if you're longer term investing. If you're day trading, it's a little bit more risky. But holding long term, you definitely will, especially with like banks like RBC. Like holding RBC, like you'll always make money like through the long term, because RBC is always consistent, so they always want to go higher, right? They always have good profit margins, they're good gross revenue, and they're consistent. So that's what happens. So, we could see this come up to another 10%, right? We could see this come up at least another 10%, and maybe another 20% if it's really, really bullish. But eventually we will have a little bit of a correction. But as we said, this was such a deep sell-off from the pandemic, like here we had in 2015 and we had in 2009, that this just, when it's so deep like that, it's such a strong momentum to the upside that gets bought up at the bottom. So there's definitely a lot of room for this to go, and eventually will we see this at about $200? Yeah, we will. It definitely will. In the next 5 or 10 years, we definitely could see this. Maybe even earlier, right, if there's a lot of volatility. Like, because right now we just had an all-time breakout. So all-time breakouts could definitely go higher really quick. So just keep your eye on it, and we'll just have a look at a day trading perspective. Just from a monthly perspective real quick, we can see there's still a little bit of room. Like this just crossed off. So last time it crossed up, it ran for a long time, right? So is there a little bit left here? There is. There's still room for this to get pushed up to overbought. From a day trading perspective, we might see a little bit of retracement here if we want to continue up, but we're just breaking out, so, well, yeah, there is a little bit of room for this to get overbought, so we could come up here and then maybe take a little bit of retracement back down and then continue up. But eventually I think there will be a little bit of a healthy retracement, as I said, but right now this is bullish, so there is room for this to run. So just keep your eye on it, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.